Welcome to Austin Stories. This is some of the greatest HOA revenge I've ever read on this channel. He rips them apart from the inside out, and you gotta see how. Then a mom gets revenge on this guy that he thinks he has HOA protection because he knows people in it. Just you wait and see. Also, all my videos are in podcast form. Search the Austin Stories podcast on your local provider or check out the link in the description. If you're not in your car, buckle up because here we go. How I gutted my HOA. Posted by ChillDude890. This is the story of how I completely changed out my community's HOA board and foreclosed on one of their houses after they disrespected me. I got fined for ridiculous things by my HOA, and I got ticked off and decided to get on the board. I then spent a year removing all members of the board I joined and replacing them with people that were pro-small HOA. I have then since helped reduce policies and tried to make the community better for everyone. Let me give you the backstory. A few years ago, I bought my first house in a medium-size, or 500 to 1,000 homes, neighborhood in a southern state. It had an HOA, but I actually picked the neighborhood because they had the lowest HOA dues in the city, the fewest rules, and the house was by far the nicest one that I could afford in my budget. After a few weeks, I got a violation notice from the HOA telling me that I had 2 violations needing correction. The first, my lawn was not green enough. And the second, the trash cans were too close to my driveway. I was thoroughly confused about number 1 as it was February in the middle of winter, so of course my lawn was dead like pretty much everyone else's, so I had assumed that either this was a mistake or an existing offense from the previous owner. As for the trash cans, I kept them on the side of my house, and I think when the HOA came by, my trash can stuck out past the side wall 1 foot, so how dare I? I shrugged them off and continued on. Come March, I got another notice, this time fining me for both violations. Each one cost me $100 and they wanted the money in 2 weeks. I was ticked. This made no sense and I was not about to let them just try and get money for BS violations, so I called the management company that worked with the board to get them appealed. The lady told me that I needed to appeal directly to the board and that I could do so in the next annual meeting in a few days. So I, of course, showed up to the meeting. Prior to it starting, I met with a few homeowners and learned they were all there for the similar BS violations and were ticked off too. I then talked with one of the members of the board about the fine appeals process. He was an older guy in his 70s with short gray hair and a very worn and angry face. He asked what I was getting fined for, and when I told him, he just looked at me and said, "And you should get fined for that? Young people like you not taking care of their homes is the whole reason I got on this board. Learn to be a better property owner." This dude was the VP of a volunteer board telling me that I did not know how to take care of my house? What a sad life. The meeting then started, and the moderator mentioned that since this was an annual meeting, we would be voting on 3 of 5 board members. They had some applicants to the board, and we could also nominate someone today. That's when I had the idea of how I could get my revenge. When the election part of the meeting came, I nominated myself. I gave some BS speech about HOAs are not here to make money, and I just wanted to serve my community. I won in a landslide, and you could see the board members getting annoyed because they had scowled during my speech. After the meeting, I appealed my violations in a very elegant way, and they agreed to waive my trash can violation. As for the grass one, apparently since I had weeds growing in my yard, like a tiny patch in the corner, they were still fining me because the weeds were turning yellow after I sprayed them. I was dumbfounded how they could get away with this, but they used a technicality in the bylaws that I had signed, so I ended up losing $100. Revenge. I will be honest, I had not expected this to work. After joining the board of 5, including myself, I was appointed secretary and had to help maintain meeting notes and review records. They specifically told me that I was not allowed to propose new policies, But I could vote on new ones proposed by the VP or the president, which I later learned was actually a violation of their own rules. I voted every new rule down as long as I was in that position. I decided that my best course of action was to listen to how the others operated and look for an opening to get each of them off the board. The first opening came when the president, who literally looked like the most Karen woman ever, mentioned that she had wanted to fine for flowers that were not neutral color. Basically, if a homeowner wanted to add something like turquoise flowers, we would fine them. She apparently had a neighbor that had flowers that she didn't like, and she wanted to use the board to stop them. It was pretty insane. I then started my revenge on her. I started a message thread on Slack, since that's how we communicated, with the other board members and asked what they had thought about her policy and the reasoning. After far too much deliberation, and two of them honestly thought that this was okay, we agreed that the policy went too far. I then made a long post in the main channel telling her that her actions were not only wrong, but that she should be excused from the board. When she inevitably flipped out, I called a board meeting in the following week, and the other 4 board members voted her off for targeting a community member for personal gain. She gave a sob story about how the board was her life and that the neighborhood was like her child, but I didn't care. That was one down. I convinced one of my good neighbor friends to join a little later on to take her spot. The next members I targeted were the treasurer and director, as I wanted to save the VP for last. They were actually pretty easy to get off the board. They were very easily swayed by public opinion. So I made a fake account on Nextdoor and waited until spring when most of the violations go out. And when the letters went out, I looked for angry posts on Nextdoor. I then would comment on each one of them, giving the first names of the 2 board members as the culprits, and told them to come to the next HOA meeting to appeal. It worked far better than I had expected. During the next meeting, over 50 people showed up and called out those by name. It was glorious. During the open session, community members grilled those 2 for their poor policies, even though they did not make most of them. The VP, now president after the other one resigned, tried to defend them, but ultimately failed. The 2 members were so distraught after the meeting, and I told them that maybe they should resign, and they both did. That was 2 more down, both of which were replaced by a couple who came to the same meeting and wanted to get rid of those rules. Finally, the board had been flipped to 4 out of 5 people wanting to get rid of all these dumb rules. The president, however, was still the same old angry, hateful man. He tried to add more rules to increase violation revenue, and we voted him down every time. He started to get annoyed, but stayed steadfast to the board. I tried a lot of tactics to get him to leave, and not much swayed him. A few months went by, and we started with a new management company. They had a much better style of property management and a website for looking through our community's records, as well as automated reports. When we got our first fines report, I hit pay dirt. The president's house appeared, and he owed around $10,000. Apparently, he had some open violations that he had never paid, and the other management company hid it from the board for him, since he had been on the board for close to 7 years. So I looked into remedies. Since his fines were over $3,000, our bylaws stated that a majority vote of the board could start an HOA foreclosure on the home, which I think is insane that HOAs can do that. So I got all the docs together and double-checked with the new management company that the fines were correct, which they confirmed. I called an emergency board session, presented the information, and 4 of the 5 of us voted to start the foreclosure process. The president got angry, cursed, and left the meeting early. We were informed a few days later that the president had resigned, paid his fine, and put his house up for sale. While I am sad that we couldn't force a foreclosure, at least he was off the board. I am currently president to this day, and I have reduced the fining policy to be a maximum of $400, and homeowners can appeal anytime they wish digitally. In addition, I have banned any grass fines until May, and trash can violations have been super relaxed. Moral of the story? Never fine me $200, call me a stupid young kid, and expect to not lose your house. I just have one simple question for OP. Why did you post this in PettyRevenge and not Pro or Nuclear? Like, Petty is like, hey, I made the HOA president trip and fall and he stubbed his toe. No, like, you literally infiltrated this HOA as a secret agent, coming from the inside just like that with an intention and an ulterior motive, worked your way up that crooked little ladder, tore him out from the inside, not just one person, but the vice president, the president, the other members, literally doing detailed police research level stuff, finding all of his violations, knowing the bylaws to be able to persecute him for that. This is not petty. This is Pro, or even I'd say, I don't know. I want to know if you think it's Nuclear or not, because this is getting pretty crazy. Destroying the HOA, ripping and tearing everybody else out of their positions, taking over, still the icing on the cake. To this day, you are the president of the HOA, and you've turned it all around, making an HOA semi-livable, I guess. OP, holy crap, you went pro-nuclear on this one. Tell the HOA my kid's too loud? Okay, deal with him some more. Posted by Queen Pate the First. So I went to visit my mom yesterday, and she told me this story. My brother, he's 9, likes to play with other boys on the block. They usually play soccer or bike races outside, and then Fortnite or FIFA 22 online. All this during the afternoons and evenings after they're done with homework. They can be pretty loud, but they're ages 8 to 12. The neighborhood my mom lives in has something similar to an HOA. They have a representative and they have to pay fees, mostly for security and surveillance, even though it is very safe. And the rep is friends with my grandma, who also lives there. So, on a Thursday, the rep calls my mom to tell her that someone complained that the kids were being too loud and it was too late for them to be alone outside. Mind you, it was like 7:30 p.m. They don't have school the next day. The street is pretty illuminated and has cameras basically on every light post. Also, the neighborhood is pretty much gated all around. My mom calmly told the rep to ask the person complaining to call her directly because she was actually outside speaking with the other kids' parents as they were watching them, and this is a family-friendly neighborhood. Rep started getting defensive and said that she didn't want to cause conflicts and making up excuses, and that was that. Later on, the rep was chit-chatting with my grandma and said that her nephew, who lives a few houses from my mom's, was having trouble with work because, quote, there's too much noise outside, end quote. So mom knew that he was the one complaining. Here's the thing. He is basically fresh out of college, which means that he hosts parties from Thursday to Saturday or just blasts his stereo while drinking alone until 4 or 5 in the morning when he passes out drunk. Kind of hypocritical, if you ask me. Anyway, cue my mom asking the boys to play right in front of his house and yell as loud as they can. My brother's curfew is 8 p.m. so he can get a good night's sleep, but my mom and the others' parents extended it to 10 p.m. because they didn't have school the next day anyway. The dude never complained again, but my mom did report him every time his speaker was on after midnight. He eventually stopped, except for a party here and there, and all was well. Update. The problem isn't the complaint in itself, it was that the same dude who plays loud butt music 3 nights a week until 5 a.m., thus disturbing all the neighbors and their sleep schedules, and goes unpunished because he has family in the HOA, has the gall to ask for others to quiet down when others have asked him the same, and he responds by getting louder. I get that kids can get very rowdy, and I know my brother is, but when asked to be more quiet, he does accommodate, and so do his friends. I guess if a 9-year-old can be quiet when asked to be, and a grown old adult can't, the problem aren't the kids' parents. I understand that my mom was petty AF for how she reacted, but this sub is indeed called PettyRevenge. Oh, OP, we should call this PettyRevenge. We should also call this worthwhile. Honestly, I get what you're doing and why I would have done the same thing, revenge. But that sub name is probably too long. This guy is being very hypocritical. He's a college guy's party. Look, hey, we've all been that age at one point. Well, if you haven't, you will be at one point in time. I have been. I'm in my mid-30s. And I know that, like, hey, kids are allowed, but you're doing the same thing and you're not acknowledging that. It's a little toxic, my friend. Not friend, a little toxic. But mom, you did what you did. Parent, just intuition, the mom energy, stepping in, big mom energy, and just setting it out like you need, taking down this guy and getting that revenge. Way to go, mom. You're a good mom. Go get yourself some ice cream or something. You deserve it. HOA fraud exposed with pro revenge when OP finds they made this mistake. Check out the video on your screen so you do not miss this insane story and the fallout. You'll love it, and I will see you there.